Welcome. This is the first of two talks that I'll be delivering today, and they're both about behavior analysis, so the science that underpins positive behavior support, not PBS per se. And in this one, I will be looking at willpower. So back in 2007, a professor working out of Hart's University did ran an interesting project, and he recruited 3,000 people, and he wanted to get an idea of how many would actually succeed at the New Year's resolutions that they'd set. And at the start of this, 52% were confident that in a year's time they would have achieved their goals. And the resolutions were the kind of goals that people often set. So exercise more, smoke less, drink less, and so on. So what percentage were actually successful a year down the line? Now, I want to try for a bit of audience participation here. So could you put in the chat, please, what percentage achieved their goals when they were revisited a year later? And I'll give you just 10 seconds to do that. And no Googling, by the way, no Googling of the study. Excellent. You're actually 1%. Wow, that's harsh. So you're very close, actually. You're very much in the right ballpark there. So the actual percentage was 12. Okay, so 88% of the 3,000 did not achieve their goals, which I don't think, given what you put in the chat, has come as a huge surprise to you. Why is that? Well, some might say they lack willpower. So I have on my shelf back here a very old Penguin dictionary of psychology and psychology terms. And it defines willpower like this. It says that it's a non-technical term for self-control or the ability to resist temptation. Okay, so let's look at this for a second. So self-control, that's quite a behavioral way of looking at willpower, and I'll come on to that. But it talks here about the ability to resist temptation. So it's hinting at some kind of innate force or maybe even trait. Now, I love the part about resisting temptation. I think that's it feels like it's on the right track to me, and it feels like it's getting closer to a behavioral definition. But of course, from a behavior analytic perspective, it's completely unsatisfactory. So it doesn't work from a conceptual perspective, and it doesn't work in terms of the underlying philosophy of science. So why is that? Why doesn't it fit with a behavior analytic viewpoint? Well, Skinner in Science and Human Behavior said that exercising self-control is in itself behavior. And like any other behavior, we have to look to the environment to figure out the variables of which behavior is a function. As he puts it, it's those variables that provide the ultimate control. Now that's brilliant, because we can change the environment. We can engage in behaviors that make other behaviors, like eating healthy, exercising more likely. So imagine how awful it would be if you were just given a dose of willpower at birth, and that's it, that's your lot. If you don't get a big dose, don't bother setting goals. So the good news is we can change. We can change things. So Skinner's viewpoint on self-control was that it consisted of two behaviors or responses. Now, I know we've probably got a lot of behavioral practitioners in the audience, and the terminology will make perfect sense. For anyone who isn't, I'll explain what some of the words mean. I was told to make it technical, by the way, so it's not my fault. So a controlled response, this response just means behavior. So the controlled response in Skinner's conceptualization is the target behavior that you want to change. Okay, so let's say, for example, I've decided that I want to lose weight and I eat too much cheese. So once a week I buy the big block of 400-gram cheese and I get through it in a week. So I want to eat less of that. That's my the target behavior that I want to control. Okay, the controlling response, these are the strategies that I engage in order to bring about that change. So for example, instead of buying the 400-gram block, I buy a 200-gram block. Okay, so before we move on to some of the self-control, self-management strategies that we can use, let's talk a little bit about why it's actually so difficult to do the right thing, to acquire and maintain those positive, those good habits. So Woody Allen is not a behaviorist, but I thought he had a good take on this. So he says that there are two types of people in this world, the good and the bad. The good sleep better, but the bad seem to enjoy the waking hours much more. So why is it hard to maintain those good habits? Because indulging the bad ones feel good. We've all been there. So that brings us to a key bit of behavioral science. It's very well established in behavior analytic research that immediate reinforcement or reward has a far more powerful effect on behavior than delayed reinforcement or reward. So think of it like this. You've got you walk into the kitchen, you've got a choice. You fancy something sweet. You can have the apple. Yeah, that's the healthy option that eventually, if that becomes a pattern of behavior, will lead to a smaller waistline. Or you can have the cake. Okay, so the reward for the apple is further away in time. Okay, you don't eat the apple and shrink. So a different way of putting this is to say the longer the delay between the behavior and its consequence, the less likely that consequence is going to impact on the behavior. Okay, it's not as likely it is to make it happen. Okay, so that brings us to something called temporal discounting. So how would I describe that non-technically? Let's say you engage in one behavior instead of another because the reward for this one is too far away. Okay, and what researchers have found is that, and this is where nature stacks the deck against us, is that even when the immediate reinforcers are much smaller, we still tend to prefer them, even when the delayed reward is much more meaningful and important. Okay, so I'll be talking about this, about self-management with regard to more everyday behaviors. But just to briefly say that it does have quite important clinical applications. So this temporal discounting, immediate versus delayed reward, it's often talked about alongside delayed gratification. So you know, being able to say no to the cake, yeah, and delayed gratification has been linked with childhood and adolescent obesity, substance-related disorders, and outside of our literature, some researchers have even linked it more broadly to success in life, I guess, in different domains of life. So work, relationships, and they've supported this by saying that in order to achieve many of the things that we, society, value, you actually have to exercise some self-control. So if you think of of studying to get a really good job, unless you're someone who loves the studying, in the moment, there is an element there of delaying your gratification. At that moment, you're sitting there reading Cooper, Heron and Heward. There are many other things that you could be doing that possibly are more immediately reinforcing. Not for you guys, of course, because we all love Cooper, Heron and Heward, but you know what I mean. So let's look at a few behaviors, good and bad habits, in terms of those immediate contingencies. And contingency is another technical word. Here we're talking about rewards and punishments for different behaviors, and those delayed positive or negative outcomes. So exercise, we're all, most of us want to exercise more. I'm 2.5 months into an exercise self-management program at the moment, which I'll tell you about later. But what are the immediate rewards and punishers available for exercising? So in the first place, there is some punishment there, pretty much straight off, if you're putting any kind of effort in. So if you're doing, 20 press-ups, at some point it's going to hurt a little bit. Response effort, and that means the effort required to do a particular behavior. Well, by definition, exercise involves some kind of effort, okay? But then think about what you could be doing instead. So those competing behaviors, okay? Watching TV, having a nap, okay? There's no pain involved in those, there's no punishment, but there is reinforcement, okay? So let's move across to the delayed positive outcomes. They're all fantastic, weight loss, better health, better physique, yeah? But they are delayed, they're far away. Healthy eating is similar. So let's look at some bad habits, and I referred to the good habits as behavioral deficits. So these are things that you want to do more of. The behavioral excesses are things that you're doing too much of. So smoking, in terms of rewards and punishers, immediately there is reinforcement. Okay, so people who smoke will say that they feel more alert. There's a kind of euphoria that can go with that. My partner used to smoke, and she always said that it made her feel relaxed. So relaxation, immediate reward there. Very little response effort in lighting a cigarette. But looking at behaviors that might compete with smoking, so other behaviors that could make you feel more alert or help you feel relaxed. So going for a walk might relax you, if you like. There is a bit more effort for those. Okay? In terms of delayed negative outcomes, the negative outcomes are pretty awful, pretty serious, but they are delayed. That they may or may not occur at some point in the future. And as well as Miltenberger shows here, they are delayed outcomes. It's also worth pointing out that they're by no means certain. So we all know of someone who smoked 40 a day and lived until they were 100. So there's not even a certainty attached to this. So the takeaway here is that a lot of our good behaviors require some effort and can sometimes be a little bit punishing up front, whereas the bad habits, not much effort, immediate reward. So for that reason, what we're often trying to do with self-management is just find a way to overcome this immediate reward, immediate reinforcement effect. Okay? And particularly with regard to those undesirable behaviors that can compete with our goals with regard to good habits. So I have to show you a CEU word here. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, some people are collecting CPD for this and they have to prove that they were watching. So the first CEU word is drags. So if we want to increase our own self-control behaviors, we've established that from a behavior analytic perspective, it's a two behavior process. We engage in one set of behaviors, the self-management strategies, to bring about a change in the other, eating the apple instead of the cake, exercising more, so on. So I have a run through of some of the strategies that we can use. And here I thought I'd share another definition, because I think the Skinner one, he really started off the discussion, if you like, on self-control, but I think his definitions aren't maybe as user-friendly. The Cooper, Heron and Heward talk about this more in terms of you engage in one behavior to control the behavior of another. For me, self-management boils down to arranging the environment to make it easy to do the right thing. So let's use behavioral science to stack the deck in our favor. So pretty much every discipline, behavior analysis, other disciplines in psychology, agree that goal setting is a necessary starting point, and actually putting it in writing is always a good thing to do for various reasons. It acts as a cue or prompt in itself. It's helpful if you're trying to get other people involved in helping you achieve the goal. It's a lot more effective when combined with other strategies. So on its own, not a good idea to rely on it. Many people will be familiar with the idea of SMART goals, so I won't spend too much time on that. But what I will say is, if you want to be consistent with the science, really do start small. I can't emphasize that enough. Hence the example goal here. This coming week, I will run for 5 minutes. So in a few weeks' time, that can be 10 minutes. That's fine. But we know that there is a bunch of other competing enforcers out there for doing something else. If you make it too hard to begin with, it will be a non-starter. What you also have to do is be precise. So you have to deal with the what, the when, the how of the goal. So write it down, put it somewhere prominent. All my self-management strategies go on the fridge, because this is a place I visit quite frequently. Now, if underneath that you create a simple table and put that up on the wall, so on Monday I went for a run, on Wednesday and Friday I put a tick whenever I do that, and actually a cross if you don't. That's helpful as well. Then you're using another self-management strategy called self-monitoring, and this is a really interesting one, because it's a lot more than just tracking your performance and finding out whether or not you are getting closer to your goal. It can be useful to get baseline data on, if applicable. So you could get baseline data on the competing behaviors, the bad habits, as well as the good habits. But it's actually become a strategy in its own right. And we know from lots and lots of research that if we track our goal-directed behavior, with just by doing that, we're far more likely to achieve our goal. So, and I'll talk a bit about why that might be, how I might be able to explain that conceptually toward the end. So that it's really easy. That my table here looked quite fancy, I guess, but it is, you know, I literally just draw it and stick it up on the fridge. So stack the deck in our favor. So functional behavior assessment. Now, this is something Miltenberger recommends. Not everyone recommends this in terms of in the context of self-management. I think it's a really good idea, and I used it, or I guess a very pared down version of it about 3 or 4 years back, and I'll talk about that in a moment for my own self-management strategies. For anyone who doesn't know what this is, it's a set of procedures for gathering information on usually some kind of problem behavior, but we can use it for any behavior of interest. So I'm going to bring in now a self-management strategy that I implemented some years back to talk about some of the strategies to illustrate them. And the self-management strategy was aimed to increase the amount of time I spent flossing my teeth. So to give you a bit of background, I was always good at brushing my teeth, but terrible at flossing. For decades, I was terrible at it. So if I managed to floss once a month, that was a lot. And sometimes it would increase just after I went to see the hygienist, and then it would just drop off again. So my goal was to floss once a day, as we're supposed to do. So in terms of functional behavior assessment, I looked at those immediate rewards and punishment, looked at the delayed positive outcomes. And just to be really honest about this was 5 minutes. I didn't gather ABC data, so it was a very, very quick process. And the immediate contingency was punishment. It always hurt me whenever I flossed, and I've come to realize that's because I wasn't doing it enough. High response effort. So for a bit of background here, I'm someone who only goes to bed when he's tired. And I only ever intended to floss my teeth when at the same time I brush them, which is just before I go to bed. So I'd go upstairs on the way to bed, tired, with the intention of flossing, and I'd skip that and brush my teeth and go to bed. So that's what happened. So at that time, massive reinforcement for the competing behavior, just going to bed. So that brings me to the next self-management strategy, the use of response prompts. And I'll talk about this in terms of the flossing teeth strategy. So I wrote out a goal. I put it on the fridge because that's where all of my response prompts go. And I actually developed this goal a little bit more. I'll show you later. Now, just to broaden this out a bit, I could have set an alarm on my phone. Huge fan of using phones to prompt self-management strategies. I could have used an object. So I could have got the actual flossing tape and left that somewhere that, I had to go in order to remind me. I'm doing that now, actually. I have, you can see that's a very small hand cream. And every year I get dry hands that bleed in the winter. It's just something that happens to me. It's worse because of COVID now. So my self-management strategy was to put one of these in all of the places I sit and spend time. The result, no more cracked, bleeding hands. So objects are really useful as well. But I went with a goal that was up on the fridge. So motivation or
Nick,
motivation.
You've
Yes.
got 15 minutes.
How long?
15 now.
Oh, thank God. I thought you said 3. Okay, thanks, Joe. So motivation. How did I use that? So I looked at those immediate contingencies. Nothing I could do initially about punishment, but there was something I could do about response effort and the competing reinforcer. And it was just to go to bed. I'm sorry. It wasn't to go to bed. It was to floss my teeth earlier. So that's what I did. And I thought about how would I work this into my schedule, because it's not enough just to say, okay, I'll floss my teeth earlier in the day. We are creatures of habit, and we have to try to break into these existing behavior chains. Okay. So I looked at, and this is another strategy now, looking at existing behavioral chains and how we can hijack them if we want to start engaging in those good habits. So a critical time for me was after putting the dishes into the dishwasher. So that's my job at home. I have more jobs than that, but that's one of them. I take the dishes to the dishwasher. And then this is a critical moment because we eat quite late in my house, about sort of 8:30, 9 p.m. And after that, I would go from the dishwasher to the lounge and watch TV. And that was it. I wouldn't move until it was time to go to bed, and I wouldn't floss. So what I did, I changed my goal to say that I'd floss my teeth every day after putting the dishes into the dishwasher. Okay. Again, went up onto the fridge. And the outcome of this was that has been that since 2017, I haven't taken data on this, but I estimate that I've probably failed to floss my teeth on no more than about 8 to 10 occasions. So about twice a year. So I'm very happy with that as someone who was never flossing before. But what I want to emphasize, given the title of this talk, is that's not because I have willpower, I don't. It's because I made use of the science. Okay? So those were my flossing strategies. There were quite a few more things I could have done. I'll talk about a couple more. So getting some kind of social reinforcement to be part of your self-management strategies. So really nice example of that, where I work for myself now, but I used to work for an organization that would send us quite often on leadership courses. And like most training, there'll be something you like and you think, oh, I'll use that. I'll go back and use this with the people I line manage, and then you forget about it. So a colleague of mine, he arranged with the guy that he partnered up with on the same course. He arranged to meet with him every Friday evening, just a Zoom meeting for 10 minutes, to talk about the leadership strategies that they'd implemented. And that was brilliant because they would see the prompt in their calendar to act as an antecedent prompt, and then they'd have a chat that involved some kind of social praise for the strategies that they used. So that was a great example of social reinforcement being built in to the actual self-management strategy. Now, you can't really look at self-management without spending a bit of time on rule-governed behavior, covert behavior. So an example would be thoughts, and private events. So how we feel in our bodies, emotions, and so on. And because when you look at consequences and how they work with self-management, it's a bit more complicated than it might appear on the surface, because of this delay between the behavior and the reinforcer, the delay between choosing the healthy option and losing weight. So I said that I'm a few months into a weight loss self-management program, and I'm throwing everything at this, pretty much every strategy on here. And one of my strategies is about 3-4 p.m. I get hungry, and typically I would have had a fried egg sandwich. Okay, so I thought that's got to go, and I need something instead. So I picked, and this will sound a bit odd, but it's a bowl of muesli with banana chopped up. Now, it's not something that I salivate at the thought of, but I quite like it. But think about this for a minute. So there I am, and I pretty much stuck to this. So I'm there in the moment. I could have the fried egg sandwich with butter and it will taste lovely, or I could have the muesli, and I tend to go for the muesli. How can we explain that behaviorally, given that as I'm eating the muesli, I'm not seeing myself lose weight? There's no immediate reinforcement for this. Okay. Well, behaviorists have theorized that rule-governed behavior, private events are playing a part. So Dick Malott, who writes a lot on the topic of rule-governed behavior, he attributes this to something he calls guilt control. Okay, so there's not engaging in the desired behavior. So not going for the muesli produces some kind of unpleasant private event in my body, emotionally, negative self-evaluative statements. And to avoid all of that unpleasant feeling and stimulation, I go for the muesli. Okay, so I mention this because this has to be informed by learning history. What makes me sensitive to guilt control, if that's what's working? So it's really useful to think of what we can actually capitalize on here in our own self-management strategies. And I said that I would say something about self-monitoring. That it's been theorized that self-monitoring, so putting a tick or a cross if you engage in the positive habit, works because it produces self-evaluative statements, I'm sorry, you know, probably in our own heads, that either reinforce or punish those desirable and undesirable behaviors. So the takeaway: create helpful rules and self-statements. So I'm guessing we don't have a great deal. How much time have we got, Joe?
Seven minutes.
Right, so what I'll do, I was going to summarize, but I think we need to allow, that's time for questions, isn't it? Yeah, okay. So what I'll do, second CEU word, grouped. So I'll skip through all of that. And thank you for listening. Any questions?